Max Holloway versus Calvin Kattar. We got minus 160 currently on Max Holloway and plus 140 on Calvin Kattar. And we've seen this line actually come down a little bit more towards the Calvin Kattar side as this actually the new year hasn't even begun. I'm actually recording this on December 30th. A good amount of time before this fight is actually supposed to go down. So hopefully we don't actually have any pullouts or anything like that, which would affect this fight from actually happening. I'm seeing a lot more love for Calvin Kattar now, and I'm starting to understand as to why. So when I put out my leans for my guys over on the Patreon, I had initially said that minus 200 on Max Holloway pre-tape looks like it's a very good spot where it could be, a solid spot for people to take advantage of a Max Holloway at really good odds. And then right before I got into actually doing the tape and doing the research for it, I saw him down to like minus 170, minus 165, and I'm like, okay, let me get my work in, and we can see if this is truly a spot that deserves to be, around those odds or even higher if possible. After I started getting into it, this is probably the deepest I've gone into a fight, given the fact that it's just so tough to call. But once I came out on the other side, I have a decent amount of confidence in the underdog here. So the reason I like Calvin Kattar, he's coming off a win over Dan Ige, which was his first 5-round main event fight in the UFC, but it was actually his second main event overall. His fight before that, or a couple fights before that, he actually fought Zabit Magomed Sharipov. I believe it was 2 fights before that. He fought Zabit in a 3-round main event, which actually got put together pretty short notice. If most people remember, that fight night was supposed to be headlined by Alexander Volkov and Alistair Overeem. Unfortunately, Overeem pulls out. Volkov gets a short notice Greg Hardy. Obviously, Greg Hardy's not down to go 5 rounds, so they demote Volkov down to the co-main event. They push up Zabit all the way up to the main event. However, he doesn't want the 3 round or the 5 rounds. And obviously, Calvin Kattar and his teams wanted that 5 rounds. Unfortunately, Zabit obviously being the be-all, end-all in this situation, they didn't allow that to happen. And unfortunately for Kattar, it being a 3-round, he did have a really good 3rd round against Zabit. Unfortunately, he could not really deal with the unorthodox nature of the attack and approach from Zabit in those first 2 rounds. So he dropped that. However, he comes back, knocks out Jeremy Stephens in a brutal fashion, beautiful step and elbow to kind of, take away the power that was coming his way from a counter from Jeremy Stephens, drops and wobbles Stephens, and eventually finishes him with some beautiful ground and pound and a beautiful elbow as well to follow up on the ground to cut him up and just absolutely have him splattering blood. One of the more disgusting cuts that I've ever seen, or at least one of the more disgusting aftermaths of a cut that I've seen in terms of it just absolutely leaking out of Jeremy Stephens' forehead. And then Calvin Kattar comes back and headlines a fight night on Fight Island and goes 5 hard rounds against Dan Ige. He only really dropped that 2nd round, but the first 3, 4, and 5th rounds were very, very much in his favor. His striking looked on point. The only concerning part to me was I was hoping that he'd land a little bit more than 105 strikes. And that's where my hesitancy here comes with Calvin Kattar, because technically he's a much crisper striker than Max Holloway. And, I think that's why we're seeing the amount of love come in for Kattar, because people are really in the know regarding what Kattar's capabilities are with his hands and even his kicks too. His kicks aren't too bad, but the most amount of his damage does come from his hands, and they're so crisp, so sharp, and even his jab too, just a piston down the middle, really busting dudes up with that jab for sure. Now the issue with Max Holloway, who's coming off of 2 straight losses now to Alexander Volkanovski, both title fights, both 5-round fights. The second one, a little bit more in the favor of Holloway, but still the judges ended up giving it to Volkanovski. It truly comes down to that 3rd round, even though one of the judges actually ended up giving, I believe it was round 4 or round 5 to Holloway. But in terms of like MMA decisions after like 2,100 fan scoring cards, it came down to that 3rd round. Rounds 1 and 2, obviously Holloway. Rounds 4 and 5, Volkanovski. But that round 3 was super, super close. Like, you could even give it a 10-10. And unfortunately, that fight would be a draw. And we don't like draws in this day and age. However, I truly think that fight was deserving of being a draw. Now, the fight before that, he dealt with a weird stylistic matchup against Volkanovski, where Volkanovski really, decided to beat up that lead leg of Holloway, and Holloway was forced to fight out of his secondary stance for the majority of that fight due to just the amount of damage that he took on that lead foot. And the interesting thing about Volkanovski's game plan with attacking that lead foot is he kind of was waiting for, or he's kind of using the feints of the leg kick to kind of open up his hands against Holloway, or even using his hands as a counter for Holloway whenever he came in. And he got a lot of, the better of a lot of the exchanges. Hence why he ended up winning that first fight. The second fight, we saw Holloway come back and almost go for like a tit for tat approach with Volkanovski. Anytime Volkanovski threw a kick, Holloway followed up with one of his own. He kind of just wanted to match Volkanovski's output and then some. Unfortunately for him, he still wasn't able to get his hand raised that night. Before that, he took on Frankie Edgar, beats him in a decision. But the one kind of narrative that I found during this crazy run of Holloway, especially after winning the belt, he's fighting a lot of guys that are shorter than him. And I'm not saying that's the be-all, end-all of this fight with Kattar, who's going to be matching him in height. But the last time somebody fought Holloway, who was the same height or taller than him, was when Holloway fought Cole Miller back in 2015. So we're talking close to 6 years since he's fought somebody who's close to his size, or at least his size or taller. So I think that's going to be a kind of a detriment here for Holloway, who it seems like he kind of depends on his range a little bit to get out of the shots and slip shots of most of the guys that he's facing, because they're just slightly shorter and not able to really to match that reach or match that height of Holloway. So Holloway had a lot of success in terms of slipping a lot of the punches, or even just kind of slipping enough that he didn't take the brunt of his opponent's punches. Now, we've seen him hurt, we've seen him rocked, but we've never seen him dropped, which is crazy that we've never seen a knockdown recorded in Max Holloway's career. But Dustin Poirier hurt him a bunch of times in their fights. Jose Aldo even hurt him a couple times in the first and second round of their fights. And then we obviously saw Aldo's cardio drop off, and that's where Holloway starts to really thrive, just as he did in the Anthony Pettis fight as well too. But the Dustin Poirier fight is the fight that we really saw what happens when he goes up against a striker that is much more technical than him and can actually last a 5-round pace with him. Guys like Frankie Edgar are able to handle that pace too, but they don't have nearly as good of a striking game as a Dustin Poirier, or even in this case, a Calvin Kattar. The Jose Aldo fight did not have the cardio to hold up with the pace that a Holloway pushes. Now, I think that Kattar has the ability to follow up and continue with the same pace that he has from round 1 to round 5, but the volume is kind of concerning to me. Holloway is a high volume guy. He'll throw over 100 strikes in a 5-round fight any given day. Kattar, on the other hand, he outstruck Ige by 20 strikes, 105 to 85, I believe the numbers were. But I expected him to kind of have a little bit more output against a guy who technically is just not on his level when it comes to the striking game. Now, Holloway, technically, again, not on the level of Kattar, but again, he can get away with his pressure, his pace, and his cardio. I just don't know if that's going to be enough for him here against Kattar. He might be able to out-volume Kattar, but it's going to come down to the more damaging strikes, and I got to give that edge to Kattar here. We saw in the Dustin Poirier fight that Holloway did slightly outstrike Dustin Poirier, especially in a couple of those rounds, but those rounds we saw Dustin Poirier land some significant shots, hurt, rock, but not drop. That's the issue there. We've never seen Holloway truly drop from punches, but we've seen him rocked and stunned for sure. And that's where I think that Kattar's going to have to go to take this fight. Like, if he goes out there, lands some big shots, we've seen Holloway hurt. At a certain point, that chin of his is going to break. And Kattar could absolutely be the guy to do that. So my confidence is on the Kattar side. And I feel like he's on the up and up. Holloway is still a young guy, even though he has a bunch of fight miles on him. I believe he's only 29 years old. Calvin Kattar, on the other hand, is still trying to find his footing in the UFC. He's had setbacks to Renato Moicano, who just had a way better kicking game and absolutely chewed up the front leg of Kattar, which really took off the output, the power, and made him very hesitant. We don't see a kick-heavy game from Holloway, so I don't think we need to worry too much about that. The only reason we saw Holloway kicking as much as we did in his last fight, it was more of a response to the first fight with Volkanovski, where he wanted to match the same type of game plan and then try to put a little bit more oomph into it. Now, if we see Holloway come out there and go Jose Aldo on Kattar, I'd be a little bit concerned if I had some money on Kattar now. I just don't think that's historically what we've seen from Holloway, so it's hard to say that that's what we can expect from him here. He's mainly a hands type of guy, a couple kicks here and there, but not Hanato Moicano level kicks, and that's where the issue is. So I think that Kattar being a little bit more slick on the feet, a little bit better with his punches, matching the range now, being the bigger guy in terms of reach, and it kind of being the same height as Max Holloway, I think that's going to throw Holloway off. So I like Kattar here. I wouldn't even be surprised if he gets a knockout too, because Holloway's been hurt a lot. I know he's never been put away, and a lot of people might rag on me for even saying that Kattar has a potential to finish Holloway, but he has a mean striking game. He has some good power. Holloway is very hittable. And dare I say, Holloway has a little bit of that tall man defense syndrome where he doesn't really care too much about what's coming his way because he's so tall. More often than not, he's taller than his opponents, and he's able to get out of the way of those. That's where it gets interesting for me. So I'm still not 100% sure if I'm gonna be making the bet on Kattar at plus 140 as well. It's a little bit sketchy. I'm interested to see once fight week kicks off if that Holloway love is going to come in due to his popularity, and if we see the line start to move towards Holloway again. If that's the case, I might be forced to make a play on Kattar here, but I am going to pick Kattar. I think he wins this fight. I think he has a solid opportunity to finish this fight too, but I will ultimately take him to win this fight via decision. And yeah, just slicker hands, slicker boxing, decent chin, ever improving game. That New England Cartel's crew is on a bit of a tear right now, especially with Rob Font just finishing Marlon Moraes in the first round, especially in his last in the last UFC event, the December 19th event. So they're literally going back to back on events with this New England Cartel team, and now Kattar getting this main event spot. He knows this is the spot for him to go out there and really establish himself in that top three of this division, and he's so deserving because he's a very high level talent, and I think this is the perfect fight for him to go out there and showcase that. So I'm picking Kattar. Again, wouldn't be surprised by a finish, but I will take him to win by decision just to be on the safe side. But yeah, I got Calvin Kattar to win this fight via decision.